I believe, to fully understand 'twas he, and without turning to look at bailiff or Maskew, but having his elbows on the table, his face between his hands, and looking straight out to sea, said in a sturdy voice, "I offer 20. The words were scarce out of his mouth when Maskew caps them with 21, and so in less than a minute the rent of the Why Not was near doubled. Then the bailiff looked from one to the other, not knowing what to make of it all, nor whether 'twas comedy or serious, and said, "Kind sir, I warn you not to trifle. I have no time to waste in April fooling, and he who makes offers in sport will have to stand them in earnest." But there was no lack of earnest in one at least of the men that he had before him, and the voice with which Elzevir said 30 was still sturdy. Maskew called 31 and 41, and Elzevir 40 and 50, and then I looked at the candle and saw that the head of the pin was no longer level. It had sunk a little, a very little. The clerk awoke from his indifference, and was making notes of the bids with a squeaking quill. The bailiff frowned as being puzzled, and thinking that none had a right to puzzle him. As for me, I could not sit still, but got on my feet, if so I might better bear the suspense. For I understood now that Maskew had made up his mind to turn Elzevir out, and that Elzevir was fighting for his home. His home! And had he not made it my home too? And were we both to be made outcasts to please the spite of this mean little man? There were some more bids, and then I knew that Maskew was saying 91, and saw the head of the pin was lower, the hard lump of tallow in Aunt Jane's candle was thawing. The bailiff struck in, "Are ye mad, sirs? And you, Master Block, save your breath and spare your money. And if this worshipful gentleman must become innkeeper at any price, let him have the place in the devil's name, and I will give thee the Mermaid at Bridport, with a snug parlour, and 10 times the trade of this." Elzevir seemed not to hear what he said, but only called out 100, with his face still looking out to sea, and the same sturdiness in his voice. Then Maskew tried a spring, and went to 120, and Elzevir capped him with 130, and 140, 150, 160, 170 followed quick. My breath came so fast that I was almost giddy, and I had to clench my hands to remind myself of where I was and what was going on. The bidders too were breathing hard. Elzevir had taken his head from his hands, and the eyes of all were on the pin. The lump of tallow was worn down now. It was hard to say why the pin did not fall. Maskew gulped out 180, and Elzevir said 190, and then the pin gave a lurch, and I thought the Why Not was saved, though at the price of ruin. No, the pin had not fallen. There was a film that held it by the point. 1 second, only 1 second. Elzevir's breath, which was ready to outbid whatever Maskew said, caught in his throat with the catching pin, and Maskew sighed out 200 before the pin pattered on the bottom of the brass candlestick. The clerk forgot his master's presence, and shut his notebook with a bang. "Congratulate you, sir," says he, quite pert, to Maskew. "You are the landlord of the poorest pothouse in the duchy at 200 a year." The bailiff paid no heed to what his man did, but took his periwig off and wiped his head. "Well, I'm hanged," he said. And so the Why Not was lost. Just as the last bid was given, Elzevir half rose from his chair, and for a moment I expected to see him spring like a wild beast on Maskew, but he said nothing, and sat down again with the same stolid look on his face. And, indeed, it was perhaps well that he thus thought better of it, for Maskew stuck his hand into his bosom as the other rose, and though he withdrew it again when Elzevir got back to his chair, yet the front of his waistcoat was a little bulged, and, looking sideways, I saw the silver-shod butt of a pistol nestling far down against his white shirt. The bailiff was vexed, I think, that he had been betrayed into such strong words, for he tried at once to put on as indifferent an air as might be, saying in dry tones, "Well, gentlemen, there seems to be here some personal matter into which I shall not attempt to spy. £200 more or less is but a flea-bite to the duchy, and if you, sir," turning to Maskew, "wish later on to change your mind and be quit of the bargain, I shall not be the man to stand in your way. In any case, I imagine 'twill be time enough to seal the lease if I send it from London." I knew he said this, and hinted at delay, as wishing to do Elzevir a good turn, for his clerk had the lease already made out pat, and it only wanted the name and rent filled in to be sealed and signed. But "No," says Maskew, "business is business, Mr. Bailiff, and the post uncertain to parts so distant from the capital as these, so I'll thank you to make out the lease to me now, and on May Day place me in possession." "So be it, then," said the bailiff a little testily, "but blame me not for driving hard bargains, for the duchy whose servant I am," and he raised his hat, "is no daughter of the horse-leech. Fill in the figures, Mr. Scrutton, and let us away." So Mr. Scrutton, for that was Mr. Clerk's name, scratches a bit with his quill on the parchment sheet to fill in the money, and then Maskew scratches his name, and Mr. Bailiff scratches his name, and Mr. Clerk scratches again to witness Mr. Bailiff's name, and then Mr. Bailiff takes from his mails a little shagreen case, and out from the case comes sealing-wax and the travelling seal of the duchy. There was my aunt's best winter candle still burning away in the daylight, for no one had taken any thought to put it out, and Mr. Bailiff melts the wax at it till a drop of sealing-wax falls into the grease and makes a gutter down one side, and then there is a sweating of the parchment under the hot wax, and at last on goes the seal. "Signed, sealed, and delivered," says Mr. Clerk, rolling up the sheet and handing it to Maskew, and Maskew takes and thrusts it into his bosom underneath his waistcoat front, all cheek by jowl with that silver-hafted pistol whose butt I had seen before. The post-chaise stood before the door, the horses were stamping on the cobblestones, and the harness jingled. Mr. Clerk had carried out his mails, but Mr. Bailiff stopped for a moment as he flung the travelling cloak about his shoulders to say to Elzevir, "Tut, man, take things not too hardly. Thou shalt have the Mermaid at 20 a year, which will be worth 10 times as much to thee as this dreary place, and canst send thy son to Bryson's school, where they will make a scholar of him, for he is a brave lad," and he touched my shoulder and gave me a kindly look as he passed. "I thank your worship," said Elzevir, "for all your goodness, but when I quit this place I shall not set up my staff again at any inn door." Mr. Bailiff seemed nettled to see his offer made so little of, and left the room with a sniff. "Then I wish you good day." Maskew had slipped out before him, and the children's noses left the window-pane as the great man walked down the steps. There was a little group to see the start, but it quickly melted, and before the clatter of hoofs died away, the report spread through the village that Maskew had turned Elzevir out of the Why Not. For a long time after all had gone, Elzevir sat at the table with his head between his hands, and I kept quiet also, both because I was myself sorry that we were to be sent adrift, and because I wished to show Elzevir that I felt for him in his troubles. But the young cannot enter fully into their elders' sorrows, however much they may wish to, and after a time the silence palled upon me. It was getting dusk, and the candle which bore itself so bravely through auction and lease sealing burnt low in the socket. A minute later the light gave some flickering flashes, failings, and sputters,